September 15, 1940. 17,500 feet above the Seine estuary, 3 miles inland from Le Havre, France. The sky is a hard, pale blue that morning. The sun glares off the polished aluminium of a Supermarine Spitfire MKI, serial K9943, as if trying to burn the world bright enough to forget what's coming. Flight Lieutenant James Archer, Jimmy to his crew, tightens his gloves, feels the slight give of the Irvin harness across his chest, and listens to the mechanical heartbeat beneath his palms. Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, a steady, hungry roar through the headphones. He scans the horizon with narrowed eyes, the reticle of his gun sight steady as breath. His leather flying helmet clings to his brow, the familiar weight of a silk escape map, and a small compass press against his thigh beneath the clipped straps. On his lap, the throttle feels warm from long minutes at full. Suddenly, the world changes. A violent, stuttering thud, like a fist punching the fuselage, and the Spitfire yawns violently to port. Tracer rounds stitch the air ahead in orange threads. Archer's right wing shudders, hydraulic fluid hisses. The smell of burning lacquer and hot metal creeps through the cockpit, acrid and immediate. Instruments flick, the ball cock tumbles. He feels the stick jerk as if a giant hand has taken it, and then the Merlin coughs, splutters, and throws up a sputter of oil onto the windscreen. Below, the patchwork of fields and hedgerows of occupied Normandy rush closer. He radios the squadron, static, no reply. Flames lick the starboard wing root. Jimmy's training takes over in staccato, practice motions, throttle back, trim, try the starter, check the choke. His gloved fingers are steadier than his mouth. The engine dies with a reluctant finality. The Spitfire falls into a shallow, spiraling dive, the horizon tilting sickeningly. For a second, time is a bright, stretched thing. Wind whines, gauges blink, and somewhere far below a church bell begins to toll as if for him. When a decision comes, it is instant and cold. Bailout. He hits the canopy with his shoulder, snaps it, feels the sudden blast of clean, cold air. Then the world becomes noise, metallic tearing, the scream of wind, the hard crack of the harness releasing. He throws himself clear into open sky. There is a terrible, exquisite moment of weightless silence. The Spitfire, a speck of orange and black, shrinking away, and then the chute blossoms above him with a snap that sounds impossibly loud. Leaves and earth rush up to meet him. He remembers the sweet, choking scent of crushed grass and the taste of dust as he hits the ground among hedgerows and orchard trees, his right ankle already a hot, burning thing. Dazed, ears ringing, he drags himself up. A farmhouse roof glints in the distance. A narrow lane runs like a black ribbon. In a hedge beyond, a pair of boots crunch. Voices, then the sudden, unmistakable syllables of German, commissive speech, cut through his head like a blade. Someone is coming down the lane. He tastes copper and grit. And for the first time since training flights over Britain, Jimmy knows the sky has abandoned him to a foreign earth. The dawn light creeps slowly over the hedgerows as Flight Lieutenant James Archer presses himself into the damp soil, breath shallow, every nerve listening. The silk of his parachute flutters somewhere behind him, an unmistakable beacon against the grass. He knows he must move, but the throbbing pain in his ankle makes each crawl feel like fire through bone. He hears the boots again, measured, confident, coming closer. Then voices, 2 men, maybe 3. German, from the clipped rhythm. One laughs softly. The laughter feels worse than the footsteps. Jimmy's heart beats, so hard he can feel in his throat. He looks down at the tiny compass sewn into his tunic lining, then toward the tree line, southwest, toward where he hopes the resistance might be. But before he can move, the sound of a rifle being cocked stops him cold. Stehen bleiben. The order snaps like a whip. He freezes, hands slowly rising. 2 soldiers in field gray uniforms emerge through the morning haze, their Mauser rifles trained on him. One of them, a sergeant with a cigarette half-burned between his lips, grins as he kicks Jimmy's parachute aside. The other steps forward, snatching the Webley revolver from Archer's belt and yanking the RAF wings patch from his jacket. Englander, the sergeant mutters. Luftwaffe gift. They march him toward a nearby farmhouse where a Luftwaffe officer waits beside a Kubel wagon. The officer is young, thin, his eyes sharp but not unkind. He studies Jimmy's torn flight suit, then gestures to a stool by the doorway. Name, Squadron, the officer says in careful English. Flight Lieutenant James Archer, Royal Air Force. Serial number 41832. Jimmy replies, steady as training taught him. The officer nods, almost approving. Battle of Britain, yes? You were lucky. Jimmy meets his eyes. Luck's a matter of where you fall. A faint smile crosses the officer's face, but it vanishes as quickly as it came. For you, the war is finished. Jimmy looks out the window. The Normandy fields he flew over just hours before now stretch endlessly before him, silent and foreign. His Spitfire still burns faintly in the distance, a column of black smoke rising like a grave marker against the pale morning sky. He doesn't know it yet, but this farmhouse interrogation will be the beginning of a long captivity, one that will test every ounce of his courage, cunning, and endurance. By late October 1940, Flight Lieutenant James Archer had been transferred by rail through occupied France, Belgium, and into the heart of Germany. The journey was a blur of rattling boxcars, stale bread, and the constant rattle of chains. Each dawn brought a new landscape of ruined towns and frost-dusted fields, territory that, just months ago, he'd flown over in command of the sky. Now he was a passenger behind enemy lines, a number instead of a name. His destination, Stalag Luft III, a newly built Luftwaffe prisoner of war camp in Silesia, designed specifically for captured Allied airmen. When the gates clanged shut behind him, Archer felt the cold bite of iron and despair. Rows of wooden huts stretched endlessly beneath a gray sky. Beyond the fences, pine forests whispered in the wind. But what struck him most wasn't the wire. It was the silence of men who had learned to live inside it. He was assigned to Block 104, shared with RAF pilots, a few Canadians, and 2 Americans who'd been shot down flying with the Eagle squadrons. They greeted him like family, offering a tin mug of ersatz coffee and a place by the small iron stove. Their walls were covered in pencil drawings of aircraft, home addresses, and crude maps of Europe. Every man here had fallen from the sky, and every man dreamed of climbing back into it. At night, the guards patrolled with dogs and lanterns, their boots crunching on gravel. Archer lay awake listening to them, staring at the wooden beams above, counting the seconds between footsteps. He thought of home, of the white cliffs of Dover, of his squadron mates who might still be out there. The thought was both comfort and torture, but something was stirring in the camp. He began hearing whispers about a plan, a secret network among the prisoners. They weren't just surviving, they were planning, digging, building, escaping. One Canadian, Flight Officer Ken Reeves, leaned close to Jimmy one night, his voice barely a breath. "We're making tunnels, mate. 3 of them. Tom, Dick, and Harry." Jimmy blinked, disbelief washing over exhaustion. "You're serious?" Reeves grinned, deadly, and for the first time since that burning fall from the sky, Flight Lieutenant James Archer felt a flicker of something powerful return. Hope. Winter settled over Stalag Luft III like a shroud. Snow clung to the roofs of the wooden huts, and breath froze into pale clouds that hung in the air. Inside the cramped quarters, men worked with the precision of engineers and the secrecy of thieves. Every scrape, whisper, and heartbeat could mean the difference between life and death. Flight Lieutenant James Archer found his purpose again deep beneath the soil. He joined the sand dispersal crew, one of the most dangerous assignments in the camp. His job was to smuggle the yellow clay from the tunnels, hidden in socks and trousers, and discreetly release it across the compound during exercise hours. Each time he did it, his nerves flared like live wires. One wrong move, one curious guard, and it would all be over. The tunnels, codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry, were masterpieces of ingenuity. Supported by bedboards, lit with stolen electric wire, and ventilated using tin cans fashioned into pumps, they ran nearly 30 feet below ground. The air was foul and thick, the walls sweated with condensation. But to the men digging, it smelled like freedom. Jimmy often worked on his stomach, scraping away the earth with a small trowel, feeling the damp grit beneath his fingernails. Around him, the muffled sounds of men whispering instructions, the occasional clink of metal, and the rhythmic breathing of determination filled the narrow shaft. The tunnel was barely wide enough to crawl through, Yet inside that dark, suffocating space, they felt most alive. At night, when the guards extinguished the lights, the men gathered around sketches of the tunnel networks. Cigarettes glowed like tiny beacons in the dark. They planned routes, forged documents, and sewed civilian clothes from old uniforms. Jimmy helped copy maps, painstakingly traced by candlelight from memory and scraps of smuggled German newspapers. "Where will you go when you're out?" one of the Americans asked him quietly one evening. "Home," Jimmy said without hesitation. Back to the sky. But the camp wasn't blind forever. One bitter February morning, the alarm sirens screamed through the compound. Guards shouted, dogs barked, and rifles clattered. Tunnel Tom had been discovered. The men watched helplessly as German soldiers poured into the site, filling the entrance with concrete and dismantling their secret. For a moment, it seemed everything they'd built, every risk, every ounce of courage, had been buried. But later that night, in the dim light of Hut 104, the whispered phrase began again, passed from bunk to bunk like a spark through dry tinder. "Harry still lives." And want to see what happens next? Click the video on the right to watch part 2.